Hey everyone, welcome to session 126 of the Behavioral Observations podcast. Last April, I had the honor of interviewing two people at the Behavior Analyst Leadership Council's 2020 virtual conference. And in this session, I'm sharing the first one of those conversations with you. It's with a name that should be familiar to listeners of the show, and that's Dr. Antonio Harrison. Antonio, as many listeners will remember, was instrumental in pulling together and facilitating session 120, which was the roundtable discussion with four other African-American men and behavior analysts in the wake of the George Floyd killing. This interview was actually recorded before session 120, and Antonio and I discussed topics that were important but admittedly lighter by comparison. In this episode, we discussed his introduction to ABA. We talked about how growing up in adverse circumstances actually helped Antonio develop some adaptive skills. We talked about why Bill Belichick is the best football coach in history. Perhaps I'm editorializing here slightly. And how Antonio maintains a high level of productivity. That said, I think the most important lesson is the part of our discussion where he talks about how he's made inroads in applying behavior analytic interventions in novel settings, such as coaching football. I think that anyone who is considering making a move to practice outside of the area of ASD will benefit from this segment of the interview. I've really learned a lot from Antonio, and I think, again, you can too. Antonio, I should also note, is a fellow podcaster. I've included links to his show, which is called Thank You, I Love You, and I'm Sorry. There are links to that show as well as Antonio's Twitter and Instagram handles, and a whole host of other resources over at behavioralobservations.com. That's where you can get the full show notes. So, again, I won't belabor this introduction any longer. I think it's just going to be a fun conversation that you're likely to enjoy. Before getting to that, I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by the 2020 New Hampshire ABA Virtual Conference. The 2020 event will be a great event. This year's speakers list includes Drs. Solange Forte, Deb Grossett, Bridget Taylor, Alyssa Wilson, Camille Kolu, and Emily Sandoz. There is flexible pricing in recognition that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected many practitioners financially. So for more information, you can check out nhaba.net. And I hope you choose to join us virtually on September 26th. The show is also brought to you by my friends at Praxis Continuing Education and Training. They've got two ACT and RFT classes coming up that seem really cool. One is called Understanding and Using RFT for Behavior Analysts with Drs. Siri Ming and Tom Sabo. And the other one's called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy with Parents with Drs. Lisa Coyne and Evelyn Gould. These are live online courses where participants can ask questions, get feedback, and so forth right on the spot. So for more information, go to praxiscet.com/BO-pod. Again, I'll have that link in the show notes if that's a little wordy for you. And if you decide to enroll, use the code OBSERVATIONS and save some money at registration. All right, so that's it for opening remarks. So without any further delay, please enjoy this fun conversation with Dr. Antonio Harrison.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Antonio Harrison. Antonio, how's it going out there in what looks to be sunny California?
It's great. We're actually getting a heat wave, man, and it's been raining for the last 3 weeks with 3 kids inside the house stuck. That can be a lot. So we're finally able to get outside in the backyard, man. How are you doing?
I'm very well. I've got 3 kids stuck in the house too. Northern New England's a little slower on the uptake of summer, so send some of that heat this way. That would be great. All right. We had a little kind of pre-interview chat the other day, and I know we've been kind of corresponding through Facebook Messenger and other media, if you will. And boy, am I excited to have this conversation finally. So again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I also want to thank the Behavior Analyst Leadership Council and all their sponsors for making this happen as well. I really appreciate being asked to do this. Um, so I want to chat with you. Your career is, I think, a little bit different than the typical Bcba. So I want to kind of dig into that a little bit. I also want to encourage folks to use the Q&A function. If we have some questions, if you have something that pops into your mind or something like that, hit it and hit the Q&A, and I'll check those at the end of our conversation. And maybe we can have some audience participation as well. So, long story short, folks, don't be shy. All right, Antonio, let's start off with how did you first encounter behavior analysis, and what really set the hook in you? What made you want to say, hey, I want to do this as a career?
Well, I went to Grinnell College in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, 4-stoplight town. And my undergrad major was psychology. And I had this gentleman who was my favorite psychology professor. He was very dry, very monotone. He had this dry sense of humor, but I loved him. I took as many classes as I could with him. And one of the things I really loved about him was he always sent us out of the classroom to do observations or manipulate the environment and see how people responded. But he never mentioned behavior analysis at all. And so I played college football, and I was a 4-year starter. And my senior year, the inside of my ankle touched my groin. It was pretty nasty. It took about 1.5 years to walk again.
I can't even imagine what that would not just feel like, but even that structurally, that doesn't make sense.
No, yeah. And to be honest, it didn't hurt because everything exploded. Like the emotional part is what hurt, because the moment I hit the ground, I knew like football was done.
Really?
Like, I had dreams of playing beyond, and it was over. Like there was no coming back.
What position did you play?
I was a safety. So I played on the defensive side of the ball. But no, so I've got, 5 screws and 2.5 Achilles tendons from cadavers in my left knee still. So it was brutal. I mean, and when I came home, because I finished out school, but it took me 1.5 years to walk again. I was casted hip to toe for 9 months. And when I finally got to moving again and could dance and have a good time, I was a 2nd grade teacher full time. I was bouncing at a club on the weekends, and I was working 3 nights graveyard shift at 24 Hour Fitness. And I was just burning the candle on both ends just because I didn't know what the hell to do with myself. So I was like, you know what? I always liked school, and I always enjoyed watching people and knowing people and interacting and seeing how people maneuvered. Let me reach out to this professor and see what his thoughts were. And I called him and he said, you're always a good student. You loved the experiments we did with human behavior. Why don't you check out this thing called ABA? And I had never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. And so I did. And I kind of got a little glimpse and feel in my research of what the science was about. And I was hooked, man. I loved people. I loved people watching. I loved observation. And then on top of that, my father, one of my best friends, we're super close, but in the late 80s and early 90s, when the crack epidemic hit Los Angeles, he got sucked into it, and it was inside of our home, not just like actual using inside of our home. But when he was not on narcotics, like he was the best dad ever. Like, and I always was like, that's not him. Like there's something going on. And so once I saw this, I was like, maybe this is a way for me to figure out how my family maneuvers, a little bit more about my dad, plus my love for behavior. And I guess the last thing I'll say is because when I found out about my dad, I was 10. And so he started using in the house, and, there were a lot of real sketchy environments and situations we were put in. So as a young kid, I had to know quickly who's the safety, who's the out, who's a risk, where's the emergency exit, keep my back to the wall, seeing everything in front of me. So I just started to understand environment and behavior on my own. And so it all just kind of clicked and merged together. And my love for that people watching and that unfortunate situation brought me to where I was. And so I said, this was it. And I interviewed with Dr. Rachel Taylor for my graduate school training, came in with the suit. She always says something about how that was impressive. And there it was, 5 years, master's and PhD, man.
Wow. It's quite a story there. And so I'm imagining that growing up in that situation, it sounds like it fostered some early kind of threat detection skills, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but just kind of the ability to kind of read a room and a profile, and kind of understand an environment very rapidly out of just sheer necessity. I've heard about that phenomenon with other folks who've had adverse experiences in childhood.
And I'll give you this just so people can understand it a little better. If you've never seen someone use crack cocaine, they become very paranoid. And when my dad would use in the house, he would get paranoid in the living room and hide behind curtains with large butcher knives. And in order for my sister and I to just freely walk through the house during those times, we would have to stomp to make noise so he knew that we were approaching, so that nothing fatal happened. So, I mean, to understand that at 10, 11 years old and respond in such a manner, you grow up fast. You have to be a quick label of character and judge whether it's a good thing or bad thing. It was a necessary thing, as you mentioned.
I see. That's quite personal, and I really appreciate you sharing that so publicly.
Yeah, man, I'm an open book. I like my whiskey straight. Let's have some fun.
All right. So let's roll the tape forward here a little bit, and why don't you tell us about how you where's some of your early job experiences, behavior analysis. But I'm also interested in we had a fun conversation the other day, just briefly, about some of the really cool stuff you're doing these days. Things that are, like I said, very different than what the quote unquote normal behavior analyst does. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and also, Matt, just feel free to jump in anytime. I know I can be a bit verbose, so
that's fine. Well, when one podcaster talks to another, it's usually a free for all. So,
right. Well, when I got into graduate school, I had great professors. There's a great program that Dr. Taylor put together with. I mean, we had Dr. Eric Carlson, Dr. David Piles, Dr. Hank Schlinger, Amanda Adams, Michelle Wallace. I mean, Jonathan Tarbucks, like across the board, just these wonderful names. Fernando Guerrera.
It's like an all-star crew for sure.
Right? I know. I couldn't. It was unbelievable. And we learned a lot in depth about the science itself, not so much the application with respect to practitioners. That came as we got the basics, but just the basics. And I was all in. I was sold. And then everyone in class started talking about working for autism agencies. And I didn't know. I had worked with kids since I was 16, but just at public schools and summer schools. And so I was like, I'm oblivious to what they're talking about. So why don't I go test this thing out? And I did. And I've done work as, an interventionist or behavior therapist or whatever term, they're given nowadays, and worked my way up to a second tier manager and then into Bcba. And I've done some large consulting for, autism agencies and behavioral health agencies all over the country. But I knew that wasn't my cup of tea. At first I felt a little bad about it because everyone was involved in it. And I thought like, am I not helping the population that I'm supposed to be in this field? But it just wasn't for me. I would much rather be on a football field with 53 kids wearing helmets in the middle of August, dripping sweat, right? And teaching those skills. So when I got into grad school, I ended up becoming a head football coach for a high school, was the youngest in the state of California, like third youngest head coach in the nation for a high school varsity squad. And really that's where my use of behavior analysis went another direction into health, sports, and fitness. And doing my master's thesis that got published in Bcba on shaping correct form tackling skills with verbal instruction and tag teach. We did a dissertation kind of testing Alfie Kohn's book, Punished by Rewards, to see what extrinsic rewards do with respect to voluntary workouts during the summer for high school football players. And so everything I was doing was wrapped in health, sports, and fitness. And I would always try to bring it into the class or bring in real world examples of things I had been through. So that was that track, which led to me just kind of basically being an entrepreneur because there weren't any jobs for me without jobs I made for myself.
Hey, I know I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, just in case you skipped ahead. which personally I wouldn't judge. I want to let you know that New Hampshire ABA has an awesome virtual conference coming up. Yes, it's virtual, and that means that we can stay safe, and just about anyone in the world can attend if they want to. There's an amazing speaker roster, all female. It's Dr. Solange Forte, Deb Grossett, Bridget Taylor, Alyssa Wilson, Camille Kolu, and Emily Sandoz. There's also a kind of values-based registration fee. So New Hampshire ABA recognizes that the pandemic has hit some number of behavior analysts pretty hard financially. And so there's some variable pricing available, and it's just going to be a great event. Again, it's September 26th. It's virtual. NHABA.net is where you can learn more information, or just go to behavioralobservations.com. I hope to virtually see you there. Thanks for checking it out. I'd kick myself if I didn't press this point here, but I want to go back to the Alfie Kohn work. Can you just give us a rundown of that real quick? Because for those who don't know, Alfie Kohn is I don't even know what his background is, but he wrote a book called Punished by Rewards, and it's usually used as an anti-ABA or anti-behavior analytic propaganda, if you will. And so it's usually used by folks who don't like ABA to see, this is evidence that ABA doesn't work, or at least that's my understanding of it. I could be wrong. So can you talk about that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, I happened to come across this book because I was, working at a private school, a very affluent and high academic, rigorous institution. This book came across, and it was huge on the lecture circuit for education. And this guy's book essentially was saying that providing extrinsic rewards is inappropriate, that people should be engaging in appropriate behavior based on intrinsic motivation and intrinsic rewards. And I was like, well, that goes against what we were talking about. Like, now, if you're talking about automatic reinforcement, but now we're just translating language, right? And so I read the book, and I decided to do my dissertation with my advisor, Dr. Mitch Freiling. And what I did was I tested that. I saw on these voluntary workouts during summer, I was going to bring the kids in, take their baseline, take attendance. They have a planned workout. They have to record all the work they do and then come in and check with me to show that they finished. And we took baseline. And then for the intervention phase, what we essentially did was, as they walked in and lined up, I would give them 3 options for a reward. It was either an iTunes gift card, which, thinking about it now, like, the kids were streaming everything for free, so they didn't want my iTunes gift card, right? A power bar, or a helmet decal, which is a little sticker you put on your helmet, which is public posting, essentially, that shares with the rest of the world, I'm awesome.
Yep.
I like Ohio State Buckeyes, right?
That's right. So I'm a badass. I got all these stickers on the helmet.
And essentially, long story short, what we found was the kids who were showing up all the time during baseline, it didn't matter if you added that external reward. There was something else that was reinforcing in the environment, whether it be automatically reinforcing or the social aspect of it or getting bigger, faster, stronger. They were going to continue to keep coming. The kids that never showed up in baseline, well, they didn't show up in intervention. How could they know about the intervention if they weren't there in baseline? Right. It was those kids in the middle who were variable on whether or not they attended and completed the workouts. The moment we introduced that external reward, 100% attendance every time. And then when we removed the intervention, they went back to being variable. So I reached out, and Dr. Freiling loves this. I think this might be one of maybe his favorite thing about that interaction of dissertation with me. I reached out to Alfie Kohn. I called him up. And I specifically said, hey, I read your book. I did this dissertation. I'd love to talk to you about my results and get your reaction. And his response was, if you want to know my response, read my second book. And my response was, well, if you're intrinsically rewarded by writing books, don't accept those royalties. And that was the last conversation I had with him. So, it is what it is, man.
That response tells you everything you need to know, right?
Right.
Oh my gosh. Did you publish those data?
We didn't. We were going to, but to be quite honest, like most who do a dissertation for so long and put so much effort into it, as soon as it was done, I was out of here. I literally had my last class on a Saturday. Sunday, I defended my dissertation because I had been doing it during my last semester. And that Sunday I walked out of the building and was like, for like at least a year, I'm done. Like, I need a break.
I see. So living in northern New England, it's changed considerably, thank goodness. But when I first moved back to this neck of the woods a little over 15 years ago, there was quite a bit of anti-ABA sentiment, and that book has been offered. I'm using air quotes for those who might be listening to this without the video, to me periodically throughout my career. Now people want behavior analysis, so it's a different landscape certainly. But yeah, it's a funny story. So thanks for circling back on that.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Considerably. Everyone, another real quick break here. So it seems like everyone's learning about ACT and RFT these days. If you didn't get exposure to this material in your grad program, or if you just want to learn more about it, my friends at Praxis Continuing Education and Training have 2 great ACT and RFT classes coming up that seem really cool. One of them is called Understanding and Using Relational Frame Theory for Behavior Analysts with Dr. Siri Ming and Tom Sabo. And the other one's called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy with Parents with Drs. Lisa Coyne and Evelyn Gould. These are live online courses where participants can ask questions, get feedback, and so forth, and do so right on the spot. So for more information, go to praxiscet.com/BOPod. That's praxiscet.com/BOPod, or you can simply go to the show notes for this episode. You can learn more about what these courses have to offer. And if you decide to enroll, use the code OBSERVATIONS to save some at registration. All right, let's get back to our conversation. So I interrupted you because you were talking about something that it's an observation that I've had, and I think Matt Normand and a co-author whose name escapes me right now wrote a paper on this in the Behavior Analyst, back when it was the Behavior Analyst, about this as well. But you talked about your path by virtue of not proceeding down the road of autism intervention and developmental disabilities was almost by necessity entrepreneurial in nature. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just imagining that requires selling people on behavior analysis. And I'm not using the word sell in a negative sense here, but you basically, so I want to talk about, how you went about doing that, what strategies that you found helpful, how do you get the word out, and so on. So talk about how you did that, especially in some of those early experiences when you're like, maybe this autism thing is not for me. I'll do something else.
Well, it was funny, especially the moment I graduated and realized, like, I've got this degree, these 2 degrees, the highest degrees you can get, and I've got all this knowledge and wisdom and ready to share. But now I need a whole new skill set of entrepreneurial skills, and I didn't go to school for that, and I didn't have that as just something that I picked up throughout my environment growing up. So I was stuck. Like, all of a sudden, it felt like I was going back to school on my own to try to figure things out. And I would talk to people and ask people. And then I would try to go out and say, hey, coach, can I help you with this science? And I'm going to use behavior analysis. Or what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a behavior analyst. And people are like, well, what the hell is that? And if they did know, they would always be like, oh, you work with kids with autism. And I was like, no, I don't. And over the years, what I realized is I couldn't lead with behavior analysis. I lead with hello. I just say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? What are you up to? Oh, how could I help this way? And if I can provide some value speaking whatever language it is you speak, for example, if I'm working with a football coach, I speak football, right? Like, I don't say a task analysis. I tell them we're going to break down the DB's backpedal steps. We're going to break them down so we have each step so that we can correct each step and reward each time they do this step properly, right? The jab set, like I don't tell them task now. I just come in, talk their language and lead with hello, make a rapport building interaction, some of those soft skills people talk about. And then I provide value. Once I provide value, how the hell did you do that? Oh, it's this thing called behavior analysis. I mean, that is what that doctor thing, that's what that is all about. Right. And then the other part of that is I realized too, and I'm not a Chris Rock fan. I actually don't like him as a comedian. But he said something great on one of his stand-ups where, I don't even know if it was a stand-up. He said when his car would break down and he would try to flag people for help, nobody would stop. But when he got out and pushed his own car, people would pull over and help him. So I decided I'm just going to start doing stuff leading by example. And as a community starts to build around, if they choose to follow me, that's when I'll start releasing those little bits of gems of behavior analysis, dropping them in. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I'm not going to lie, man, it's been a rough road. Like, I don't own a home or have a ton of money, and but I'm happy and I'm doing what I want to do.
I see. So what were some of the first applications in which you use this strategy?
So the first thing was with football, just coaching my own team and getting the other coaches on board with what we were doing. And just in terms of skill acquisition, in terms of corrective feedback. If you've ever been on a football team, their coaches have a tendency to give you a 30-minute soliloquy on what you did wrong. Right. That has, and it's never anything I always remember a coach being like, catch the ball. Like, well, yeah, that's what he's trying to do, man. Like, give me something else.
As if he intended to not catch it.
Right. And so that was the first place I started to do it. But then with the consulting of autism agencies, I just picked those up to make money. And then I started teaching graduate school because I realized the place that I could best be of influence to share that we have a scope of behavior and not behavior within the autism community is by sharing with students of mine. Oh, no, I did this other thing. And that led to collaborations. And I guess the last part, because I didn't get to finish that, and I'll circle back to the question of what I'm doing now. Like, when I was teaching for Purdue, I got burned out and I decided to resign. And I was like, I need a job where I can still do some of the stuff I like being in front of people, helping train, but that has less brain power. I'm a little burned out. And so I ended up becoming a fitness coach for this treadmill fitness studio where they do high intensity interval training, where I play DJ. Like, I make a playlist. We get the workouts. We match BPMs, beat per minute on the music, with beats per minute for trying to get the heart rates elevated. So if we want you to move faster, we're going to get a faster tempo song and get that heart rate pumped up. And I was like, this, and I'm on a microphone and I'm playing DJ. I was like, this is great. And that led to then being asked to do videos like the Peloton videos where you get on a bike and the coaches are there. I'm one of those guys for treadmill. So if you go to like a hotel and get on a treadmill and hit the app for give me a workout, I'll pop up and run you through a workout, which then led to just got released yesterday. I'm super excited about this. Oculus VR headsets. They took a game like Bcba where you slice different bubbles and it's wrist dexterity, and they turned it into a full body exercise in virtual reality world. And I'm one of the coaches. So you put on this VR headset, click on my workout, and I pop up in virtual reality coaching you through. And all of that was just by me doing my thing and being me and sharing behavior analysis after people saw the benefit of value that I could give to them.
Wow. So it's like a real life Fruit Ninja or something like that?
Yeah, it's dope, man. Like, if you ever get a chance to try it, you're in the game. It's music. It's fun. And then you get done 25 minutes later after I'm coaching you through, and you're dripping in sweat with like 300 to 500 to 700 calories burned.
Wow.
You've had an amazing time and you haven't left home and you're still in your pajamas, and now you can shower up and get going instead of trying to do decline push-ups off of a chair in your house or hotel while you watch a at-home video.
Fascinating. I'm always interested. So how did you kind of make these connections to develop these opportunities?
I made the connections by simply being who I was as a person first and a behavior analyst second. I'll never forget it. And I'll say I don't think she minds. I was in class as a graduate school student, and one of my professors was making the joke like, yeah, once you guys get in the field, all your friends are just going to be behavior analysts. You won't know anything outside of that. Like, that's going to be your world. And I raised my hand and was like, I disagree. I'm going to make it a point to make sure I have friends who aren't behavior analysts. I don't want to be just this to be the only thing in my wheelhouse. This is not going to be my whole world. It'll be a part of my world. And that's the way I make it. Like, I know what it's good for. I know when to use it. It's part of my professional approach. I am a behavior analyst, but I'm Antonio before I'm a behavior analyst, like straight up. So And a lot of times when I speak about behavior analysis, I translate for whoever the audience I'm talking to, because I don't want them to gloss over and feel like I'm being condescending in any way, the same way as if, you go to someone and they're talking this technical language and you feel like, whoa, wait a minute. But I also get the need for having technical language, especially amongst ourselves. But I always lead as me before I lead as me as the behavior analyst.
I see. And I guess the flip side of that is that, I guess some of the mistakes that behavior analysts make when trying to disseminate is doing the opposite in terms of, not using everyday language. And, from my point of view, talking about the science first, I totally agree with you. That's not a winning hand to play. It's a way to get people to tune out sooner rather than later. I always think of it in terms of solving a problem for someone else, and is the way to move forward with disseminating what we do.
Well, and I always think about it, and I give the analogy of like the football program we coach. There are tons of parents who don't want their kids to play football for obvious reasons. But for a school with only 200 boys, where we have to pull 50 out of 200 and there's cross country and water polo, for us to continue to be a success is because we don't talk about getting them to college. We don't talk about them going pro. We don't talk about how we're going to be league champs. What we talk about is give 100%, do what's right, and love each other. We talk about how the coaches create an environment where the kids thrive as individuals, as people. When I meet a kid who I want to play football, I find out who he is, what he's interested in. Oh, your music, what kind of music you listen to? We go from there. Once you get in the program, now we can get to the technical stuff. Once you've bought in. But to buy in, you got to buy into me before you buy into what I'm selling, right? Like when you go to a store, how many of us have bought things from people that we really didn't need just because that salesperson was so nice to us and we made such a connection?
I am guilty as charged, sir.
Yeah.
What I've got perhaps a selfish question. I didn't plan on asking this, but it occurred to me. So I have two boys that love football. They're middle schoolers right now, and our rule is like you can play once you get to high school. But you mentioned people not wanting their kids to play football for safety reasons and things like that. As a football coach, especially as a defensive oriented guy, your job is to hit people, right?
Yeah.
How has your coaching style changed, or do you more generally have comments on the safety of the game, especially for younger players?
So first off, let me tell you, in college, my nickname was Angry, because I would just run into, like, I had total disregard for my body, and I was trying to take your head off. Like, that's how I played the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it was taught back then.
So you're like the Rodney Harrison of your.
I think more Troy Polamalu. I like that.
Now you're talking to a Pats fan, so I gotta go Rodney.
Yeah. But on top of that, like, I wanted to do my part. That's why we wrote and conducted the experiment on teaching correct form tackling. Like, I'm going to show you how we can do this properly to reduce the risk of injury. I also, and there's a few things, and I'll make them small. Yes, football is a collision sport. It's not a contact sport. It's a collision sport. However, football is not the number one leader of concussions, period. Girls' high school soccer is. And no one is calling for any girls' high school soccer team to put on a helmet. I'm sorry.
I did not know that.
I watched a girl in high school soccer go up for a header with someone, and they bumped heads, and she split her skull wide open. Yikes. She was out of school for the rest of the year. Like, no one's mentioning that. And also no one's mentioning that outside of football, no other sport is doing as much as football to protect for concussions. Yes, did the NFL mess up and try to cover stuff up? Yes, they did. But are they making steps to do better? Yes, they are. For my kids, I told my boys, if you want to play tackle, you got to wait till you start to hit puberty, period. Now, that may be 7th, 8th grade, because I know also if they've played 1 year of tackle prior to getting to high school, they're going to be light years ahead of the kids at their school. And I want them to be. I want them to be safe and protected. So, I mean, for me, football, and here's the other point I guess I wanted to make. Football got me to one of the top 15 liberal arts colleges in the nation for the past 25 years, great academic school where I didn't have a scholarship. I got an academic scholarship because Division III doesn't give scholarships. Where I walked out of school that was a $35,000 a year tuition owing $8,000 a year. I knew what I signed up for. No one who plays football, everyone knows, just simple physics. You've got two large human beings who are working to be bigger, faster, and stronger, running full speed at each other. Of course, there's going to be damage. I wouldn't take it back one day, any of it, not even my knee injury, right? I knew what I signed up for. So anybody who's saying, oh, I didn't know, no, you knew what you signed up for. And it's one of the greatest games that's ever been played because the reason to me it's so great, my dad's been 65. When he was 65 and I was younger and he was taking me to play basketball, I see, adults playing rec basketball, rec soccer, rec tennis. When you hang up your helmet and cleats, there's no putting that back on.
Right.
I don't know any other sport like that.
Obviously touched an area of of strongly formed opinion. But that was informative for me. I appreciate that.
And I'll say this too, Matt. If your kid wants to play, let them play because two things might happen. One, they might get hit the first time and go, "Oh, this is not for me," and they'll alleviate your concerns. Or two, your kid might be the kid that other parents are worried about their kid, getting run over by. Your kid may be a beast. You never know. All
right. I'll take that into consideration. Yeah. Thanks for expanding on that. That was fun. So let's talk a little bit about one of the things we chatted about the other day in our kind of pre-interview conversations that you mentioned that you are, you've helped a lot of people with kind of personal productivity and things like that. So in the couple of minutes we have left here, I'd love to get some thoughts about, what your tips for productivity are. Are there specific goals that you've achieved using particular strategies? And especially in this kind of what I like to call the era of quarantine, a lot of people who are sidelined in their day jobs, or at least working differently and working from home. I see on like Facebook, people are doing all sorts of things like, either reading more or like, if they're, if they had a background in art, they're doing more, art or music or what have you. And long story short, people are kind of either learning new things or discovering old passions and whatnot. And so can you talk a little bit about, just overall how you approach getting things done and take it from there?
So I have to say that part of that is my history of reinforcement, right? Like I've been an athlete since I was 4 years old. So having to manage my time to be able to go, I was a junior Olympic swimmer before I was anything, and we'd have practice before school. I would go to school. So set like 6:30 to 7:30. Then I would go to school in elementary, get the bus ride back to the swimming pool, have practice for another 2 hours, and then have to go home and do homework. So part of it was my history of reinforcement growing up, the reinforcers I got in sport being strong enough to compete with having to do homework and all those other things that, were aversive to some. And quite frankly, when it comes to things you want to do, you're either going to make time or make excuses, right? Now, I know that sounds a little cliche and it's not necessarily behavior analytic, but what I mean by that is if you want to set something up, there are ways to structure your day. There's also ways within our science, as we know, to self-monitor, to have a third party for accountability, to publicly post in forums like social media about what you're going to do, to reward yourself. That's a big one. So many people are so quick to say, all right, I got to do this. If I don't, I can't have this thing, or this thing is taken away, or they beat themselves up. And very few people go, wow, I just worked out 6 days a week. I'm going to go take myself to get my nails done or go get a massage or get an ice cream sundae because I deserve it because of all the hard work I put in. People just don't do that, right? They beat themselves up before they reward themselves. And so for me, I take data on everything I do. I check off when I get stuff done. I've got, projects that I work on. I reward myself when I do that. Like for example, today I had, my presentation earlier. I've got this podcast here. I've been, I did a 30-minute free workout online right before this. I got a kids live PE class right after this, and then an IG live where someone's asking me on coaching meditation. This is a long day for me. So I'm going to reward myself, and I'm going to have some tacos and some scotch at the end of the night, like, for a job well done. And so like I keep track of everything. And for me, the biggest thing that has changed is I wake up anywhere from 4:30 to 5 in the morning. And it's because I got 3 kids. Like I can't stay up till 3 in the morning because I got to wake up and help them to get ready for school and doing all that. So I wake up early, and the first thing I do, drink some water, I get a workout in, I then meditate, I then journal, I then learn something new, and then I have a coffee and a cigarette on the back porch. And by that time, it's time to go in and wake everyone up. And I've done 2 hours of stuff just for me to get me settled for the day and be productive before I even wake anyone up or have any other interaction, including my phone. And that's been extremely helpful for me to be more productive, having that me time, controlling that me time, rewarding that me time, and keeping myself detached from the rest of the world, because I got to focus on me before I can do anything else. So in being productive, whether it's self-monitoring, rewarding self, having a third party, there are ways to do things, but you've got to structure what you're interested in, and don't assume you're going to be interested in meditation or reading more books. You may like audiobooks. You might like podcasts. You might like meditating with a mantra or lying down or a guided meditation. Try different things. Don't assume that what you're supposed to be doing is anything that's reinforcing for you.
Got it. Do you use any particular apps or other forms of technology to kind of manage these things, or are you just old school notebook?
Old school notebook, paper and pencil. I may type it up in like my schedule. I type up and print out and slide underneath my glass desk, so it's right there. I take a picture of it. Now, do I follow that script to a T? Hell no, man. But it's a script to go back to, right? Like think about anyone who does anything. Architects, they need a blueprint. Actors, they need a script. Now, they may vary from that in ad lib or improv, but you always got to have something to go back to, man. If you don't have something that's a foundation, what are you doing? You're just flying by the seat of your pants. And I like to do that when I'm out having a good time, not when I'm trying to be productive.
I understand. Yeah, I once heard someone say being overwhelmed is not a function of having too many things to do, but it's not knowing what to do next.
Yep.
And it's one of those sayings that I wish I knew the author was, so I could give proper attribution. But when I heard it, I was like, dang, that's pretty good. And so,
and check this out, Matt. Like I try not to touch during pandemic. Quarantine's been a little different, but before that, I wouldn't touch my phone until lunchtime. So no emails, no text message, no nothing. And at first people are kind of like, this dude's not getting back to me. But people slowly get used to that behavior. And guess what? If it's really a fire, you can call me to help you put it out. But when you stop putting out other people's fires, they tend to take care of that shit themselves, man.
Yeah. That's very Tim Ferriss way of going about it. Yeah, very cool. All right, I see some comments coming up in the chat, and we've got some questions coming up in the Q&A. So let's maybe take a couple of these before we close things out here. Let's see. This one's kind of, I'm going to have to edit these as I'm reading them.
Is this the one from Christopher? Or?
Yes, yeah. Being someone who's so well versed in behavior and such, do you sometimes find yourself observing the behaviors of your players and just seeing that the ways they sometimes carry themselves or don't carry themselves, and think to yourself, this person's going to make a difference as a leader? In other words, I guess again, to paraphrase here, I think the gist of the question is, are there subtle signs that make you think someone is, destined to be a good leader? What are ways in which you can detect those attributes, I suppose?
There is, but I will put this caveat. Not every leader leads in the same way. My quarterback, he's bravado. He's swagger. He comes out. He's got the towel hanging. He's got a necklace on. He's playing music. He's vocal, but he steps up and plays. And his play, with his talking, he'll make a touchdown and walk up to you in your face and tell you, I just scored on you, right? And tell the other guys to come on, and guys follow that. My middle linebacker, best player I've ever coached in my life, hands down. the kid does, if he could be invisible while he played, he would. Doesn't say a word, doesn't want to be recognized, doesn't want the accolades. He just wants to play football. And the team rallies around him more than anyone else. But he doesn't have to say anything. He leads by example, right? So when I see someone, two things that I notice specifically with football, when there's someone who talks the talk and walks it with their play, people tend to follow them. When there's someone who you don't have to push and you don't have to say, come on, let's get a workout. Like, why are you late? They're in there before you are. They're calling team meetings. They're working out. They're busting their butts and they're not saying a word. And everyone's just seeing them lead by example. You know, that kid's destined for greatness as well. And the kid that is the leader that gets the least recognition is the kid who doesn't play. That's the kid you as a coach really have to reinforce, because that's the kid who shows up every day, plays on scout team, does everything possible to make the team better, but will never win an award and will only get in during garbage time. That's the kid you need to bolster up on your shoulders in front of the whole team to make sure that everyone knows we're all in this together.
I see. All right. Great answer. Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate that. Just looking at the chat here, just want to give some shout outs to folks with some comments. So we've got Casey, Ryan, Maurice, Adrian, and Rose all chiming in, guys. Thanks for the comments. Thumbs up and hell yeah, and all sorts of stuff like that. So you got some fans rolling in here, Antonio.
Well, and can I say this, Matt?
Sure.
I don't want it to seem like I'm downing or criticizing anybody's efforts to disseminate behavior analysis in any way that they feel is necessary or appropriate. What I'm saying is it's an approach that's worked for me. And the one thing I think we can all agree on, regardless of whether you lead with science first or person first, is I wish we had more representation within our graduate training programs of the application of the science outside of the field. It baffles me that when I tell students that I coach high school football and train people and deal with self-discipline and things like that using behavior analysis, that all of them say like, oh my God, you can do that? I had no idea. But then there's nothing for them to follow up to say, yeah, we've got a connection with this NFL team, or we've got a connection with this high school team. Because anytime a student is interested, I don't care where they're from. If I can help them in supervising and they can come to my football field, come on, let's go. But there's not enough of those avenues. So I think we can all agree on that anything outside of autism, I think, should be more embedded in our graduate school training with respect to practice.
Yeah, and I could see that's going to be a tough hill to climb because the job. Yeah, you have to train people for where the jobs are, and as we noted earlier, a lot of these, atypical behavior analytic endeavors require a lot of discomfort. Like you've had to knock on a lot of doors. You probably got told no a lot and you had to keep going. Yeah. I'm making some assumptions here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to be quite, again, I don't want to overuse the word entrepreneurial, but you have to be a self-starter. Whereas, you can come out of grad school and take a very well-paying job that's going to give you benefits and, mileage and yada, yada, yada. So I could see that being an uphill battle, but I think it's definitely one worth fighting. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah. And Dr. Rachel Taylor, when I was in grad school, I thought she was super interested in it, was this notion of delayed gratification, right? These delayed rewards instead of instantaneous. And I found it fascinating because I never had a problem with it, because as an athlete, I've got to train 7 days to play one game for 4 hours, right? So that's what made those no's easier. It was just like, it's all right. It's just pregame. I got 5 no's. All right, first quarter, I need to get 10 no's, right? Let's score a touchdown in the second quarter. Let me get 1 yes.
Right.
So that was a big help for me.
Got it. All right, cool. More comments coming in. Alexandra, Casey's firing some more in. Excellent. Good. Very nice. One last question before I get to my ultimately last question here is, I want to ask.
Do that all the time, man. I'm like, I got one more for you.
That's right. Well, we're gonna get every minute out of this interview for sure. Can you tell me why Bill Belichick is the best coach of all time?
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
but I can. I can.
I just being a New England homer, but I don't. I was just joking to see if you agreed or not or disagree with that. But
oh no, he is the best coach of all time.
Okay, all right.
I'm not a Patriots fan. My dad is, but he is. But if you want to know the answer to that,
yes, I do.
Bill Belichick is fully invested in football. And at that level, it's business. It's not about making these young men feel like they're going to, thrive to be good citizens. No, this is a job, right? You come in. What's that? There was a story they told where some guy was complaining about his contract. Bill Belichick walked into the meeting, told him he was traded to the Cleveland Browns to get his contract, and then asked who else wants to be traded or who else wants their money, right? Like, it's business. Come to work. Let's get our job done. And he approaches it from that standpoint and has built this culture where people walk in expecting that.
Yeah.
They're not surprised by it. They expect it. They come in ready to work. And he's had guys like Brady to support it. So that's why he's the greatest. He created a culture that no other coach has been able to do in a long, long time.
Yeah. They call it the Patriot way.
Patriot way, man.
Yeah. So, all right. Sorry if you're from Miami or, Long Island or, Buffalo, and other parts. So anyway, all right. Enough fooling around. All right. Let's cap this off here. Antonio, what is your advice for the newly minted BCBA?
Be true to yourself. And what I mean by that is whatever you're interested in, whether you see, blatantly the application and tie to behavior analysis or not, and you have to figure that out, stick with what you want. It's the same advice I give dissertation and thesis students is pick something that you're interested in, that you love, that you're willing to be completely invested in, because you're going to be engrossed in this constantly. And if you are in it and you love it and you're really enjoying it, it's rewarding, it's reinforcing, it's not going to be as difficult as if you're doing something that it just works. I just have access to this population. It just makes sense. It's the easiest thing to do. You're going to hate your life. Mm-hmm. Period. You will. So be you. It took me a long time to learn that, and I'm still working on that because of the different worlds I grew up in and live in and still navigate. But be true to yourself. Whatever it is you want to do in behavior analysis, do it and do it at the highest degree possible. And once you get up there, shout our science from the mountaintops. Bring us along. Maybe you end up being a dance choreographer through behavior analysis that makes everyone recognize how great we are. Be that person, right? Be whatever you want to be. Just don't get caught up in, I've got to do this thing because everyone else is. All
right. Can't think of better words to end on. Dr. Antonio Harrison, it's been a fun conversation. Thanks for chatting with me today.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate what you've been doing with this podcast and helping disseminate our field and in a way that is easily consumable to the masses.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.